Hello everyone, this is Michael from Blue Sky Bio. In this tutorial video, I'm going to show you how to do a digital tooth setup for aligners and how to export STL files of the aligners themselves from the Blue Sky Plan software. This is an up and coming topic, a lot of discussions regarding this. So this tutorial video will show you how to generate those STL files of the aligners themselves and export them from the software. I'm going to run through the process flow quickly, not in detail, but quickly. If you just want to focus on the export part of the aligners, and you could jump to the end, but of course in an actual case, you'll need to do the digital tooth setup to be able to create the steps, to be able to create the aligners for those steps and export them to STL. I do want to remind everybody that if you're looking to outsource the design and or the manufacturing of the aligners, we have fantastic pricing for aligners on labpronto.com. You can order directly from labpronto.com orthodontics aligners. Same grade aligners at fantastic prices and faster turnarounds. Okay, you get a complete case, unlimited aligners for $9.99, and then we have the smaller packages for smaller cases. And placing the orders super simple from labpronto.com. You could track the orders. You'll get notifications regarding the orders via text and email, as well as being able to track all of your orders via the clinical backend. Okay, I'm using version 494 of the Blue Sky Plan software. And just to mention, if you're not using the latest version, then download from blueskybio.com, blueskyplan.com, or go to help, check for updates, and update directly within the software. An export from the Blue Sky Plan software is one export credit. The price is 1 credit, irrelevant to the number of models or number of aligners. For both arches together, it's 1 credit. The ballpark of around $20, $21. So just so you know, that's the cost to export either the models and or the aligners, irrelevant to the number of steps, the number of models or aligners in your case. Okay, we're going to kick off the case by clicking Orthodontics, Aligners, Import Models. We also have the option to import the patient CT scan together with the models, but we're not going to get into that right now. I'm going to navigate to the location of the models on the computer. I could hold down the Shift key to multi-select my upper and my lower, and then click OK. Okay, the software takes the first model, shows it on screen, asks what it is. Going to go ahead and click on Maxilla. Here we have both of our models. These models are obviously in occlusion to each other. If they're not, then we have functionality here to be able to import a buccal bite and to put the models in occlusion. I'm going to enter the patient's name, continue to draw alignment. Let's use the left mouse button to grab and drag and rotate the model. Okay, and before we continue, just the usual release waiver here. My tutorial videos are to demonstrate the functionality of the software. They should obviously not be used for clinical advice. I am not a dentist. We have plenty of tutorial videos on clinical consultations. We have the webinars as well. So my videos are to demonstrate the different functionality within the software. What we're doing now is we're placing 2 dots on the corners of each tooth. Just going to go around the arch. To mark the dots, you hold down the Shift key and the left mouse button. This can be done relatively quickly. If a tooth is missing, let's go ahead and mark a missing tooth here. Hold down Shift key and right click instead of left click. You want to place this missing tooth indicator as close to the adjacent tooth as possible. We're going to see on the other side of the arch if the tooth is missing and there's an empty space for it, there's a void, then we're going to go ahead and place it in the middle over there. Okay, we've marked one side. We can see in the diagram, we're following along according to this diagram here, that it automatically advances to the other side of the arch. Okay, here I'm right-clicking to mark the missing tooth and continuing, then right-clicking again to mark the position of the missing tooth. I'm clicking Finish Teeth Marking, Close Model. Here we have an open model, we're going to close it. Okay, now we have our closed model. We're going to clean it up in a minute or two. The software is going to do that automatically for us. And right now we're going to click Continue with Mandible. And once again, we're going to go around the arch, marking the teeth. I'm holding down Shift key when I want to mark. Let's right click here for a missing tooth and continue. And right click again. Going on to the other side of the arch. just right click, continue. Okay, now we have annotated our teeth. We've placed the 2 dots in each of the existing teeth. We're going to go ahead and click on Finish Teeth Marking, close model. Now we have the closed model, and then we're going to click Continue to Teeth Segmentation. Okay, the software automatically segments the teeth from the model. We see the teeth are now colored in different colors. We see that we have a margin or border going around each tooth. We could see the results are quite good, and let me tell you, I'm super excited about some of the software developments that we're working on for future releases, which is going to make this process even better than what it is now. But you could see this completely automatic segmentation done by the software. Let's go ahead and continue with the mandible. And here again, we see that the results are quite good. I was actually going to look for a situation where I could show you how to modify or correct, but everything is already done here. Let me just demonstrate quickly. If you want to activate, if you do want to fix or need to fix one of these margins, just activate by left clicking on the tooth. You can also click on the tooth in the diagram in the illustration that we have here. And then simply you're able to grab one of the nodes and just move them around. If there was a bigger problem, then you could just hold down the shift key and just redraw that curve like I'm doing now. Again, there's no reason to do that. Undo is the back arrow, or Control Z will undo what is done. Okay, so that's the basics of it. We also have some more functionality here if needed. If you need to separate, you can see that between the teeth, there's one unified line. That's to make sure there's no material, there's no part of the model that's not included in one of the teeth, and there's no part of the model that's included in more than one tooth. So between the teeth, there's one unified line. If you do need to separate it, for example, you could just right click and you could choose Remove Link, and now we have two different nodes here. If you want to create the link again, just place them on top of each other, and the link is there. Anyway, so that's more of a situation where we need to fine-tune the segmentation done by the software. We're going to click Continue the Model Trimming, and we can see that the software has placed a trim curve automatically around the teeth. If we want to modify it, we could grab in any of these nodes and grab and drag, and the software is going to trim away the excess material besides what's inside the curve to clean up the models for us. At this point, I'm going to click Continue with Mandible. If I don't want the software to trim, then I'd simply check the checkbox, Don't Trim Maxilla. Otherwise, I'm just going to click Continue with Mandible. Again, we could confirm the curve. We do have in Tools Preferences different settings about the distance from the teeth that this curve is being placed. It's not the focus of this training tutorial, so I'm not going to go into it now, but you should know that the settings do exist there. At this point, I'm going to click Continue to Teeth Moving. So the software is going to process the trim. Okay, we can now see that we have cleaned up models and segmented teeth. So now we're ready to start with the digital tooth setup. Okay, let's take a look at our maxilla first. Let's uncheck Show Opposing Arch. Here we have the curve for the snap to curve. We could raise and lower the curve. We could rotate the curve as needed, and we could grab any of these nodes and move them to position them properly. Okay, right now we have a checkbox for Move Point Symmetrically. That moves exactly that, the point symmetrically. We can uncheck it if we want to move one side without the other side. Okay, so you should align the curve as you see fit. You can then click Snap All Teeth. Let's turn off Edit Curve. There we go. Now let's click Snap All Teeth. Okay, and the teeth have been snapped. They creating a digital suggestion for an initial tooth setup. We could then use the widget to modify the positioning as needed. We have the option of moving the teeth based on the tip or based on the torque, and you can see how the widget moves accordingly. The widget is placed based on the midline that goes on the tooth. If you do find that the midline is off for whatever reason, you have this option to refine midline, and here you could move the widget and the midline without moving the tooth. Once you've finished with that modification, simply turn off Refine Midline. So now you could go tooth by tooth, and if you need to make any modifications then you could simply go ahead and do that. If you want to remove all the teeth together, let's say we see that the curve is not wide enough, then we could go back and click Edit Curve, make the modifications that we want to do here, click Turn off Edit Curve, click Snap All Teeth, and do it that way. So we have both of the options of snapping all teeth, and we also have the ability for tooth by tooth modifications. The tooth that's active, the tooth that has the widget on it, will then will show in the chart the total amount of movement and in which direction the movement occurred. You're able to select the frequency with which you would like the patient to change their aligners. And let me just show you quickly. We have the option here, Tools, Preferences, Tooth Movement Limits. This is the amount that the tooth is able to move from model to model or aligner to aligner. These are the default settings. If you feel that it's too aggressive or too passive, you're able to simply change the values across the board by the Modify Current Limits option. You could increase or decrease, click Apply, and all of the values will update to create a more aggressive or more passive movement from model to model or aligner to aligner. Okay, I'm going to switch over to mandible now. And again, we could do the same type of thing with the curve. We could check if it's properly placed. If we are okay with the placement, we could turn off Edit Curve and then click Snap All Teeth. We could then go tooth by tooth again, and we can modify the placement of individual teeth as needed. We could show both teeth together and just click on the arch, click on the tooth, and make any modifications that we need. So once you're satisfied with the final positioning of all the teeth, go ahead and click on Continue to Edit Steps, and the software, the user and the software together are going to essentially generate all of the intermediary steps, the intermediary models and aligners. So first, in terms of visibility, we have these checkboxes to show or hide or to uncheck and hide IPR, diastemas. We could see the models in their initial positions to be able to confirm and compare to their final positions, and we could also see the final position. So if we use the slider, for example, to show the step-by-step movement, then we could use the final position to demonstrate the final position model as well. So we have these different visibility options, and we have the slider that shows us the different steps and the movement from step to step. If we have IPR and diastemas activated, then we could see as we go from step to step, we could see how that affects the IPRs and diastemas. Just to explain quickly what these two columns are. So first of all, they relate to the activated selected tooth. Our first column is start step. So if we see that, for example, we want this tooth to move at a later point in the sequence, we don't want it to start moving with the other teeth. We want to hold it. I guess this one's not such a good example because it's not moving in the initial steps. Let's say this tooth, if we don't want it to start moving initially, we want to wait to a later position to avoid diastemas. We want to have it start, let's say at step number 6 or 7, so that the other teeth could start moving first. Then we could simply change the start step from 4 to 6. We do need to click, anytime you make a change to either of these two columns, you need to click refresh steps, that the software could recompute the steps. Also be aware that while sometimes it's necessary, it will extend the treatment time, it will extend the number of models and aligners. But that's what the start step column is for. You could force a tooth to start moving at a later step. The mandatory column allows you to dictate where a particular tooth should be at a particular step in the process. So again, if we see that this tooth is colliding and we want it to be, we want to force it to be in this position at step number 6, for example, then we could click mandatory for step 6, this relative to this tooth, and then click refresh steps. Okay, we could see now what we did do, that it extended the treatment time necessary, the number of models and aligners, so just be aware of that. So now we could go through the process teeth movement and confirm that it's achieved the results that we want to achieve, and it's now acting the way that it should be acting. Of course, in this example, the extra tooth movement is not necessary, but for demonstration purposes only. Okay, I'm going to undo actually what I just did. Okay, now we're back to 6 or 7 steps. So those are the explanation of the start step and those mandatory columns. Once we're happy with the movement of the teeth, and we've modified it if it needs to be modified, we could go ahead and click either continue to export or to add buttons. Before we do so, I'm just going to show a couple of other buttons that we have here. Restore to default step plans. So if I've made all sorts of changes and I decided that, hey, I don't like the results, I want to go back to the defaults and maybe accept the defaults or to remodify again, I could click restore to default steps plan and it will restore to the defaults. We also have step details that shows us the movement of each tooth at any given step. So right now we're looking at step 7 of 8, for example, so I could click step details and see the information regarding that step. And I also have the ability to export videos. This is a great way to share a treatment with a patient. You could select if you want to create a video of the way that the models are visible now on screen, or both draws separately, or both draws in a bite. You could add any custom text that you want to add to the video, and then click OK. You'll be able to generate and export the video. This functionality of export, of course, there's no charge involved. So you could go ahead and create videos to be able to send via email or through social channels or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and click on cancel. Okay, we're now ready to proceed. On the bottom part of the screen, this is what's important right now for being able to design printable aligners. First of all, I'm going to check add buttons. We'll demonstrate that functionality quickly because that is automatic button placement. And we're going to move to design printable aligners. So this is telling the software what the next steps are. It's telling the software how we like to proceed to the next steps. So again, I've activated add buttons and design printable aligners. So now we have the button continue to add buttons. We're going to see that the software is going to evaluate where buttons are necessary and they're going to automatically be placed onto the teeth. And here we are, no user intervention necessary. At this point, what you're able to do, you could click on a button. We could select the relevant model. We could click on a button. We have the widget. We have the measurement distances from the edge of the tooth. We're able to resize or move the button using the standard normal widget functionality or rotate as needed. We could remove all if we like. We could right click and choose remove or duplicate. So this is our automatic button placement. Proceeding to continue to design aligners. Okay, now we're at the aligner design stage, and this is really the motivation for creating this tutorial. Let's take a look at one draw at a time. Let's look first at our maxilla. Let's turn it off, show opposing arch. And what has happened is that the software has automatically drawn this curve. This curve is indicating where the aligners are going to be created and the depth to which they're going to be placed onto the gingiva. We have the option to have a continuous curve shape or scalloped. So that's super simple. If we want to switch one or the other, just switch the radial button and click reset curve. And we also have the trim margin, which is the distance of the curve below the tooth. So if we want to move the curve closer to the teeth, we could decrease the trim margin and click reset curve. Okay, so now we're back. And again, always we could grab and drag any of the nodes as needed to modify this. We could go ahead and switch to the mandible now. Let's change this to 1 millimeter as well. Continuous, reset curve. And these are our aligner curves. The aligners are going to be fabricated by the software up until the curve. Okay, now we click continue to export. And what we see on screen is that the software is actually digitally fabricating the aligners. So it's going one by one for each model. Each model, as we know, is slightly different and has slightly different teeth positioning. So it's going through the steps and it's creating the aligners one at a time. So that might take a couple of minutes. You could just let the software run. It's a good time to go grab a cup of coffee or whatever. Okay, I paused the video not to take up your time. We finished creating the aligners for the maxilla. Now it's running through the process creating the aligners for the mandible. I'll pause this for now as well. Okay, now we're up to the export screen. So let's unpack what's going on here. First of all, let's turn off our maxilla. We could see that we have the model with a liner on it. If we run through the steps, we could see for each step we have a model and an aligner. And what we have going on back here is our platforms for vertical printing. Okay, let's simplify this view, the screen a little bit more. Let's turn off export models for a second on the bottom. And now we just have export printable aligners. Now what we're able to do is unlock the base, and if we would like to or need to reposition the base, we could go ahead and do so. We want to make sure that the base overlaps with the liner so that there's good contact between them. Okay, it's a bit too much. Let's back this up. Okay, we could rotate as well. Now what's really great is we're adjusting the positioning on one aligner, but once we're done adjusting the positioning on the one aligner, the software is going to update the positioning on all of the liners. Okay, we want to make sure there's contact on both sides, and that it fits properly to the liners. We could also see that we could see the angulation of the platform. So if we want to make sure, for example, let's say there's a 15-degree tilt, we could go ahead and rotate the platform to create that tilt. We could also just put in the value and hit enter, and then it creates that tilt for us. Okay. When dealing with the base for the liners, then obviously make sure to select apply on aligner. Now we could go ahead and check export models, and we could do a similar type of thing for the models. Let's unlock. Again, we want to make sure there's good contact. It doesn't need to be too long. We also have great functionality here where you could actually separate here, apply on. I saw that it wasn't working, wondering why. The reason it needs to be apply on model because we're dealing with models. Here we go, and we could separate the base to save on printing material and printing time. And again, we're going to set this up for one model, and then the software will set it up for all of the models. So same type of consideration. We have the tilt that we could set to be whatever we like. By default, the tilt is -10 here. And we have the option of exporting just the models, just the liners, or the models with the liners. It doesn't affect the cost. It does affect the time that it takes to process and to export. And obviously, if you're printing everything, then it affects the printing time and the printing material. Once you're done with adjusting the liners and the models and the vertical bases, then really what's left to do is if you want to emboss or engrave text, which is recommended to identify the model and or the liner with the patient and their relevant number in the sequence. So you could go ahead and click Show Label. Here, if you want just the number without the patient name, then simply delete the patient name, or you can have it with the patient name. I'm not going to go into all the different settings that we have in Tools and Properties, but right now it's set that we have the patient name and then the number underneath it. We could go to Tools and Preferences, scroll down here, and we have Label, Text, and Numbering. Right now it's separately. We could go ahead and change that to one line. There's all sorts of other settings that's here. I'm not going to go into them right now, but just to point that out. And then I'm going to click on OK. And now it shows up on one line. So if I wanted to emboss onto the model base, for example, then I could position where I want it to be. Shouldn't be too close to the edges. We could go ahead and position that. So this obviously will be for the patient that I'm calling Sky Blue, and this is the sixth. This is the sixth model, and then I could go ahead and click on Apply. Please note Apply on Model or Aligner, so you should select the relevant one. I'm going to click Apply on Model. This is just telling us that the hollow model checkbox is marked, meaning that when we export the models, they're going to be hollow to save on printing times and printing material. So again, the point of that is that you shouldn't engrave or emboss too close to an edge. or too deep if you're engraving. So just keeping in mind that the models are going to be hollow. So we're going to click on OK, and then it's going to apply the text onto the model. Okay, this is the folder that we created. It contains in it our models and our aligners for the mandible. We could see that that's what we have active and highlighted on screen. We should run it again now for the maxilla. Same process, I'm not going to go through it, of the vertical bases and embossing the text. You could simply click on maxilla. You could hide the opposing arch if you like, confirm the basis for vertical printing, emboss the text, and then click export again. So each draw export is half of a credit, irrelevant to the number of models, irrelevant to the number of aligners. Both draws together is a full credit, so you could digitally plan and create the STL files for your case, upper and lower together, for one STL credit in the ballpark of around $20, $21. If we want to take a look at one of these files, we could see this is one of our aligners that we've generated. There are many different settings in the software regarding aligner thickness and other settings. Pretty much everything is customizable. Here's a better view with a better viewer. Okay, as I was saying, everything is pretty much customizable in the software. We could create another video with a deep dive into different settings that we have for orthodontics, but what I just demonstrated now is the standard process flow in order to generate models and aligners for STL printing from the Blue Sky Plane software.